On the morning of February the 2nd, 2006, I didn't wake up. I started to leave my body. I was gone. They said it's too late.
What happens when we die?
In that state on the other side, I understood why I had got sick. It was only when I died that I learned to see God in my own eyes. The people who hurt us most, if they cross over, they're usually the ones helping us the most on the other side. Within 4 days or so, the tumors really started to shrink and dissolve, and the doctors couldn't believe it. In order to have strong life force energy, we have to constantly be able to do things that energize us.
It's not like you have to die
Yes.
to become, participate in this larger oversoul. You're participating currently.
I was aware that I had lived multiple lives. I couldn't distinguish which were past, present, and future. I had the ability to access information from other people's lives because there's no boundary between my soul and your soul. I would want everybody to know that their main and biggest responsibility is to expand love for themselves, expand their life force energy. And that is the best thing you can do, not only for yourself, but for humanity, because we are all connected.
What happens when you die? All of us have pondered this question, and very few of us have any idea of what it's like when we cross from this world to the next, or even if there is another world. And then there's Anita Moorjani. Suffering from stage 4 cancer, she went into a 2-week life-threatening coma. And she experienced mystical realms beyond your imagination and came back to tell the tale and also share the story of her miraculous recovery from cancer and all of the wisdom about how to live a life that'll prevent you from being in the same situation she was in and give you that faith and confidence that the continuity of consciousness is real, that death is a transformation, not an end. And so I can't wait to share this podcast with Anita Moorjani. So a lot of us have speculation about what happens when we die. And there's very few of us who have a remembered firsthand account of what that's like. But take us back and all the way to your cancer diagnosis and then into the moment where you actually crossed over, and then we'll get into what happened.
So I was diagnosed with lymphoma in 2002, and it continued to progress over a period of 4 years. So lymphoma is cancer of the lymph glands, and so it spread throughout my lymphatic system. So I had tumors all through my lymphatic system, and these tumors, as it spread and as they grew over the years, they grew to golf ball-sized tumors. Mm-hmm. So I had these golf ball-sized tumors from the base of my skull, all around my neck, under my arms, in my chest, and into my abdomen. And by that point, this is 4 years after being diagnosed, my body had stopped absorbing nutrition. I was so sick because of all these tumors. And so my muscles started to atrophy because I wasn't getting enough nutrition in my body. And I wasn't able to walk anymore because my legs just couldn't even hold the weight of my body up. And my lungs started to fill with fluid. So I had to keep having my lungs drained from fluid every 3 weeks because when I would lie flat, I would choke on my own fluid. And I weighed about 85 pounds, and I was so weak that I couldn't even hold my head up like this. My head was always hanging down. My neck didn't even have the strength to hold my head up. And I had these open skin lesions where toxins were weeping out of my skin. I was in really, really bad shape. I was very weak, very uncomfortable. I was in a lot of pain, a lot of discomfort, and a lot of fear. I feared the cancer, what it was doing to my body. I feared death. I was fearing the treatments. I was just in so much fear and discomfort. And then on the morning of February the 2nd, 2006, I didn't wake up and I had gone into a coma. Now, I was being cared for at home at this point, and Danny called the doctor, my husband. He called the doctor, and the doctor said to actually rush me to the hospital. So they had me rushed to the hospital. And when the doctors at the hospital looked at me, they said that I was gone. They said, it's too late. There's nothing more we can do for her now. And it's just a question of waiting. And they said that my organs were now shutting down. They said my kidneys had already shut down. The rest of the organs were now shutting down. And the doctor, the senior oncologist, took Danny aside and said that it's just a matter of hours. She's not even going to make it through the day. She's not going to be here tomorrow. And it even says that in my medical records that he had informed the family of this. But at that time, while my family were distraught and the doctors were poking needles into me and connecting me to machines and heart rate monitors and all of this, I started to leave my body. And as I left my body.
So did you have some awareness? But you said that at that point you started to leave your body, but did you have some kind of awareness of this before you left your body?
So it was interesting because for a while it felt like I had one foot on each side. I was aware of being in my body and I was aware of what was happening outside. But it's like gradually it felt as if the awareness outside of my body started to expand.
Got it.
Which I am feeling or sensing or interpreting as I was leaving my body, because the outside the body awareness felt like it was expanding and expanding. And so as I left my body, one of the first things I noticed, and it's very subtle, it's interesting because it's not like I popped out or anything, but I just started noticing that, wow, this is feeling good. I'm actually feeling good. And I started to notice that the pain was gone. The fear was dissipating. And all the discomfort was gone. And I just started to feel good. And then slowly I realized I was, in fact, feeling a sort of what I would describe here as being euphoric. Like if we can get to that state when we're here, we would say, oh my God, I felt euphoric. But without the physical body, it almost felt like, oh, this should be normal.
Right.
And so, because it was just a state of no pain, no fear, no worries, no concern, no discomfort, nothing. And I started to notice that what I felt was just powerful, just great. I felt, I call it love, because to me, love is the absence of fear.
It's the fabric of the universe itself, right?
Exactly. It's the fabric of the universe, succinctly put. And that's exactly what I feel love is. And so that's what I felt. It was like the fabric of the universe is love, but here when we're in the physical, it's interrupted, by fear, by pain, by sorrow, by suffering, all the things that we bring in here to
I would argue that maybe sorrow, not to be granular, but sorrow is still love in a certain way. But fear is the contractive force, where love is the expansive force. And
you're right.
There's a kind of beauty to real grief or sorrow that I would say is still like a different flavor of love. But all of the other things you mentioned, the fear, the doubt, the separation, all of that is what actually keeps us from swimming in the blanket of this seamless code of love that's the amorous cosmos we live in.
Yes, you actually have a really good point, because grief is a form of love. Yes, it is. It's a deep love that is gone, but it's still a form of love. So you have a really good point. But yes, without all those other elements and emotions and past traumas and all these things to interfere with this fabric, I felt like I was enveloped by this sea of love, and it felt incredible. And I was aware, I could see my family around my physical body. Now I was aware of my physical body.
So your visual field was still open,
So,
but you were particularly looking at yourself and the room.
so I didn't have any biology. So I didn't view myself from the same way that we look with our eyes. It was like I had a 360-degree awareness that went beyond the room I was in because, again, not using my eyes. So I felt like I was limitless. I was not contained or restricted, I should say, because we're not contained in a body, but I was not restricted by a physical body. So my vision wasn't exactly vision, like I didn't have to turn anything to look or focus. It was just awareness, 360 degrees, up, down, out, through the walls. It's hard to explain, but it's almost like wherever I put my focus or my awareness, that's what would come to my attention.
So I don't know if you know too much about me, but I've been a psychonaut for the last 25 years on the great plant medicine traditions. And this has a lot of resonance for the deepest visions that I've gone through. And so in the deepest visions, I remember my the second time doing ayahuasca, I had my visual field just burst open, felt like my pineal gland exploded and the top of my head peeled off. And I was just in this state. And I remember I was able to see the shaman, Maestro Orlando Chuandama, and he was appearing as this white dragon. And I remember I would turn my head. I still had enough awareness to turn my head, but the visual field didn't change. I couldn't not look at him. He was there in the same perspective, whether I turned my head left, right, up, or down. And that tripped me out, because we're so used to our eyes.
Yes.
If I turn and look this way, I don't see you anymore. But in that state, it's like you're losing the perspective of your ocular, the oculus of your eyes. It's really interesting.
Wow. I'm glad you had that experience. So you understand. So basically, that is the soul. It was your real self, not your physical body. You were seeing with your soul, and you weren't even using your eyes. And that's why no matter which way you turned your physical head, it didn't make a difference.
Yes.
Because you were seeing with the soul. That's what happens.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. And so when seeing with the soul, you would technically even be able to see your own body.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And my body looked small and insignificant compared to how I was now feeling.
Right. Wow. How incredible. And in that, so from that place, then I imagine you started to have some thoughts and revelations, right, that started to come through.
Oh, a lot. I had a lot of clarity. I actually felt, so first of all, I was able to feel the emotions and feelings of everybody that was in the room around my physical body. Like there was no separation. It's as if when we're expressing through a physical body, we have these boundaries that are there, that are just inbuilt because we're in this 3-dimensional, 5-sensory physical body. But as a soul or a spirit or whatever we want to call it, all these words just seem so small. But as an infinite being, it was like I overlapped. I didn't know where I began or ended, and it was like I overlapped, and I could feel what Danny, my husband, was feeling, and my mom, she was there. And my brother was flying, trying to get to me before I died, and the doctors and the nurses, and I could feel what they were feeling, and I could feel their helplessness, and my family who were distraught. And I wanted to tell them that I'm okay. I'm better than okay. I feel incredible. This is amazing. But of course, I had no vocal cords. I couldn't communicate with them, and I didn't know how to get a message across to them then. So
now,
your brother's flying on this plane, and in other experiences I've had in the deepest of the deep in the medicine journeys, I experienced the ability to call forward into my vision state that which I placed my attention on. So if I
Yes.
wanted to see, so I'm curious, like if you wanted to see your brother, could you have gone to see him and have him kind of open up into your own visual field?
I did. I actually saw him. So technically, I didn't know, like nobody had told me that he's rushing to get on a flight. I saw him on the flight. So my family was surprised after I came out of it because I knew he was on his way to see me. So when I saw
your family, your brother's coming to see you, you're like, I know. And they're
Yeah.
like, what the hell? What's going on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I saw him rushing to get on the flight. And immediately I thought, I need to stay alive at least until he gets here because he will be distraught if he gets here and I'm already gone. Then he missed me. So I even remember feeling that and thinking that, if we can use the word thinking. But I had the sense, and now I hear all the time of family members where they're dying, but they wait for their daughter or their parent or somebody to arrive to see them and greet them and say goodbye before they go. And, and I totally relate to that. It's like, oh, I have to stay alive at least till he gets here. And then I started to realize that I was surrounded by beings that are non-physical. And I recognized some of them as being from this lifetime. One of them was my dad, who had died 10 years prior. Another was my best friend, who I'd lost 2 years prior, who had passed from cancer as well. And then there were other beings that I did not recognize from this lifetime, but I felt their presence. I felt their love. They were there to help me through this process.
And were these human entities, or were these like angelic entities? These beings, you're saying beings.
So they were not human as in not physical.
Right.
Some of them may have been physical. So I realized that some of them may have been my grandparents and people who I didn't recognize from this lifetime.
But they still appeared in like humans.
Sort of human. So this is the part that's harder to articulate. I could tell they were not physical, but it was like they were projecting something for me to understand who they are. It's like almost like they create, like they're
translating information into something that's understandable and intelligible.
Exactly.
Right.
It's like they were translating the information or the imagery so that I could perceive it, but again, without physical eyes, almost like intuitively, you just know. I knew that they were here to guide me. I knew that they loved me unconditionally in a way that I had never felt love. I say love me unconditionally, but the word unconditional is redundant because if it's not unconditional, it's not love, is it? So I really felt loved as though it was a kind of love, as I said, like I've never felt here before. I realized that I never knew what love was until I transitioned. I really didn't know.
Or at least capital L love.
Yeah, capital L love.
Yeah. This is this is really interesting because also you grew up with a kind of Hindu faith and background.
Yes.
Right. So was there moments, and I know, you have some thoughts on the reincarnation process, et cetera, but was there like an initial awareness that this was either similar to anything that you'd ever heard of before, or that like if you were going to interface what your own faith was up to this point in your belief in the cosmology of the universe, did you start to see similarities or was there distinctions?
It was mostly distinctions. So I would say that this experience shattered any religious beliefs I had. It actually shattered religious beliefs, but created deeper, new beliefs that to me are more, I just call it spiritual, But again, I keep feeling words are just not powerful enough, because the problem is we live in a world where even religion has become polarized and divisive, and a lot of religions are falling apart. And so I also had bought into a lot of doctrine and dogma, and I had beliefs that followed certain dogma. But being in this realm, it shattered everything. And I can't even label it any one particular religion. To me, I feel the experience was too big for a singular religion.
Mm-hmm. You know, one of the interesting things is I grew up before my first medicine journey, and I was staunchly atheistic. I'd seen all of the cruelties, as Voltaire said, remember the cruelties. I'd been to the dungeons of the Inquisition. I'd seen the cruelties of religion and the wars and all of the divisiveness that's come. But interestingly, throughout my path, I've encountered the being, the Christ being, which really represents that kind of unconditionality of love.
Yeah.
And I think there's, in a lot of these, there's a spark of the truth that you could find in different, in different places. But then, of course, it's been codified and put into doctrine and dogma, and the rituals have been hollowed out. But there is this kind of, in a lot of these traditions, this root of,
yes,
there is a place of unconditional love, and that's God. God is capital L love. And you start, and the Christ is the one who can express that, in the physical form. And that's kind of where my own journey has taken me, the closest to finding that state.
Yeah, I actually believe that every religion started from that point of trying to spread this unconditional capital L love and trying to spread the word of God. But every religion is from different cultures. Each one did it in their own way. Possibly people who had near-death experiences were the ones that started to try and spread the word, to try and uplift people and bring joy. But it's been hijacked, and religions have been interpreted, misinterpreted. So usually what I tell people is that if your religion makes you feel expanded and makes you feel loved and makes you feel like loving people and sharing love, then the religion is working for you. But if your religion makes you feel fear and restricts you and constricts you, then it's not working for you.
Right. I mean, I think one of the things that have done the most damage to our own psychological understanding is this idea to fear God, become God-fearing.
Yes.
Like, that is the exact opposite orientation. It is the complete inversion of what we should feel when we think of God.
100%.
God.
Yes.
Like, yes. It's the opposite of fear. It's the relinquishing of fear.
It's 100% the opposite of fear, yes. And that's what I learned. So I grew up in Asia. I went to Catholic school, but I was exposed to Buddhism because I lived in a predominantly Chinese city. Most of the people were either Buddhists or Taoists, because I grew up in Hong Kong. I went to a British school, and so the kids were all from the UK, and so were the teachers. And we learned the Bible, and my parents were Hindu, and they took me to the temple every week. So it was a very mixed culture. And in Hinduism, you believe in multiple gods, and you worship all of them, and you fear all of them, and you serve all of them, and you pray to all of them, and you revere to all of them. And for me, the most interesting thing, I had always thought we were to fear and revere the beings on the other side, God, gods, doesn't matter what religion you're from, we had to revere. When I crossed over, I learned that they revere us.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They look after us. They're there for us.
And then from that place of gnosis, the worship can go both ways.
Yeah.
you're worshiping God as God is worshiping you.
Yes.
And then and you're devoted as they're devoted to you. It's like it's a bilateral street where it's not this one-way thing of some mysterious other.
Yeah.
It's like, no, like I love you so much.
Yeah, exactly.
I've always been a collector since I was a kid. Whether it was sports cards, magic cards, comics, stamps, or coins. And as I've gotten older, I've transitioned to collecting original art. I also believe in precious metals as one of the safest and most stable stores of wealth. The impossibly cool thing about my new company, Metalmark, as part of the Aubrey Marcus Collective, is that it combines both of these things that I love. Fully assayable and recoverable fractional gold notes, paired with impossibly beautiful, cool, and collectible limited edition art. So if for some reason you don't like the art anymore or the art loses its value, you can always just keep the gold. If any other class of art loses its value, all you are left with is paper, or in the case of NFTs, pixels. And if you are just starting in collecting gold, instead of having to drop $2,700 on a coin like this, you can get in for less than a Benjamin.
So at some point here, you came to a choice point, right?
Yes, I came to a choice point as to whether I wanted to come back or not. No part of me wanted to come back because my body was so sick and I had been suffering and my family had been suffering, and it was so amazing on that side. But my dad wanted me to understand that it wasn't my time. And it was important that it was my dad because I grew up with a very turbulent relationship with my dad because he was the one that had instilled a lot of fear in me. And in that state on the other side, I call it a state of clarity where I understood why I had got sick. I understood how all the choices and decisions I had made over my lifetime had caused me to reach this point of lying there in that hospital bed dying. So I understood what it was that took me to that point. And I understood that it was because I had lived this life that was filled with fear. And when I say filled with fear, I mean fear of everything. Fear of disappointing people, fear of shame, fear of not living up to expectations. And also later it turned into fear of cancer because I watched people get cancer and die of cancer. And every choice I would make in my life was from a fear of not being enough, having enough, doing enough, as opposed to being from a place of wanting to do this out of a desire, a love, a passion, a reverence for life, or a love for myself. So I never made choices from that space. I didn't even have it in my awareness that one does that because I was brought up in a culture where men are revered more than women. There's a lot of gender disparity, particularly in the era I grew up in. There was a lot of gender disparity, and a woman's worth is measured by how valuable she is to the men in her community. And so I was always seeking approval from the men in my community, particularly my dad. And my dad at that time was very hard to please. He was very, very old school Indian male from that generation. I knew that he was disappointed that I was a daughter and not a son. And it showed. It showed. And so nothing I did was good enough for him. And so it would have never occurred to me to do things just because I want to. Everything was to seek approval and to be the good daughter. And I was taught that I would have to be a good wife to a man someday. And they would help me select the husband. You know, it would be an arranged marriage. And so I was groomed for that kind of life. And I realized when I was on the other side And so basically, I lived thinking I'd always disappointed my dad. But I realized when I was there in spirit that actually I was perfect the way I was. I was loved unconditionally. And my dad was the one that wanted me to know that he loved me unconditionally. And you see, what I understood is that when we cross over, we leave behind not only our physical body, but we leave behind our culture, our race, our religion, our gender, and all the baggage from our past. And so here was my dad and me. And the only thing that crosses over if you leave all of that behind is your pure essence, your pure soul, pure love. We can call it what we want. And so it was my dad's pure essence and my
was your
pure
dad
essence.
still, sorry if you mentioned this already, was your dad still living in the hospital room, or had he already crossed?
Oh, he'd crossed.
Okay.
10 years prior, he had already crossed.
Right.
And so there's...
So from that perspective, he was already in this far more enlightened state,
Yes.
communicating to you the pure truth of his love for you.
Yes. And he had crossed for the past 10 years, and he wanted me to know that he had actually been watching over me and helping me. And one of the things I realized is that the people who hurt us most when we're alive and when they're alive, if they cross over, they're usually the ones helping us the most on the other side.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes perfect sense, because they've seen with the clarity of vision
Yes.
that comes from this, kind of soul perspective, the truth of their whole lives and how they've lived. And it's this grand reveal. And I experienced this kind of life review process too in my very first psychedelic journey, where I looked and I could see, and I was always a good guy. I had really loving parents. My mother and my grandmother loved me so much, and they gave me a flavor of unconditional love. And my father was deeply, he was very fair and had deep values, and he lost his temper sometimes, but he was always really fair. So I had fairness and value, and I had love. And so I was a good kid, and I was a good guy, but I could see where I'd slipped up, where I'd been selfish, where I'd been inconsiderate. And it was oh man, I could just feel the weight of that. And also all of the beauty that I'd shared in my life. I could be wow, I'm so proud of you, Aubrey, amazing. So it was this interesting moment in that kind of mini life review I had of understanding where we might get these ideas of heaven and hell, which have been completely taken in the wrong direction.
Yes.
But the heaven is knowing I lived well, I spread love, I did this, I did so good, and you're now in the state of love. And the hell, if you could call it that, is just, oh man, I could have done so much more. I could have done so much better. And there's forgiveness that comes with that, but also I could imagine the desire, even in the crossed over state,
yes.
I want to make this right as best I can.
That's exactly what it would feel like, because I could feel that from my dad. He wanted to make it right. He wasn't suffering. He was filled with love. He wasn't in some kind of hell for he wasn't a good dad. He was very cold and disengaged, but he wasn't being punished for it. It was him that wanted to make it right.
Yes.
And it was part of his own evolution, his journey. But he was doing it out of a place of love, not because he had to, not because he's going to be punished, but it's in that state of clarity. It's oh, I could have done this so differently. Oh, wow, I didn't realize I was damaging her so much. And he wanted to make it right. It's that. And all I felt from him was that unconditional love and that real deep, and it's I didn't even need to forgive him because I understood him. Because with forgiveness, you still need to see that person as being wrong.
Right. You have to have recorded the grievance.
Yes.
And there's a great saying, love holds no record of wrong.
Yes.
Right. So there's nothing to forgive.
There was nothing to forgive. There was nothing. It's I see you. I understand you. You were a victim of your culture just as much as I was.
Right.
You're doing the best you could with what you knew. And so the relationship with my dad after he crossed over and after I had this experience has been much better because I feel his hand. I feel his help. I feel that love so much more than when he was in the physical. And so I always say that my dad is the one who actually instilled the fear in me throughout my life. But in death, he's the one that set me free from that fear.
Wow. So when your dad's saying, "All right, you're not finished," like you're coming back, we'll be together in this place some other time, but for
It's
now
not
you got to
your
go.
time.
It's not your time. Did you argue with him at all? Did you go, "Dad, like I'm sick.
Yes.
Like this is so uncomfortable. Why would you want me to go back?"
Yes, I did. And now, of course, we were speaking to each other, I'm going to say telepathically, but it's like everything he wanted me to know, I knew everything I wanted him to know. But I was like, I don't want to go back. I don't want to, there's no reason to. Everybody who's taking care of me is suffering. I'm just holding everyone back. But then my dad said to me, and I got the understanding, if I put it into words, that my dad said to me, now that you actually know the truth of who you really are and how loved you are, go back and live your life fearlessly because your body will be healed very quickly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And that was prophecy.
Yeah, I saw it unfold. And I saw things like, it was like I was given glimpses of what my life would look like if I came back. And my dad also wanted me to know that you have some gifts waiting for you. You will you want to go back to avail those gifts. And he wanted me to know that my purpose and my husband's purpose, Danny, our purpose was linked. Now, I got married to Danny after he had passed away. And I had felt that, my dad missed seeing me married, and he'd always wanted me to get married. And but he wanted me to know that he was there. He was there at my wedding. And he now was instilling in me that Danny and you have a shared purpose. And if you don't go back, he won't be able to fulfill his purpose either. And if he can't fulfill his purpose, he may follow you in a number of months, or he may have a shortened life as well. So I made the decision to come back. And as soon as I made the decision to come back, my dad said, go back and live your life fearlessly. My eyes started to open on my physical body.
Did you feel like right before that moment, was there any final words that you had to say to anybody from that soul place, or not even words, but any communication that you had to any other of the beings that were in the field with you?
So I wasn't feeling that I was saying anything to them, but I was feeling them sending me off.
Right.
Like,
so it was
wanting
kind of
me-
like universal. Everybody was like giving you the blessing to return.
Yes. And wanting me to know that they're there, that I have nothing to fear, because I was literally conditioned, programmed to live a fear-based life. And so I was now being assured, you have nothing to fear. You've experienced the worst thing that anybody could experience, like dying, a slow, painful death from an illness, a terminal illness. You have nothing to fear now.
So you open your eyes.
Yes.
And at that point, people must have been shocked.
Yes. So my family, now my brother was here, and I said to him, as soon as I saw him, my brother had landed and he came straight to the hospital. And I said, I saw you on the plane. I knew you were coming. And he said, how did you know? And I was just saying to my family, Dad is here. I'm going to be fine. It's not my time. And they were, on the one hand elated, but confused, because I kept saying, Dad is here. So they called a doctor, because at that point it was just me and my family in the room. And there was no doctor in there at that time because I had been resting. I'd been in the coma. So they called a doctor to come in, and the doctor came in, and he was very surprised to see that my eyes were open, but I was still very groggy.
Sure.
And the doctor then told my family that she's still very critical, and don't raise your hopes, because sometimes people do just open their eyes and say a few words. And if she's not making any sense, it's the drugs playing with her mind. Because I was saying, Dad is here. And I was saying things like that. So the doctor was saying, don't raise your hopes. It's the drugs playing with her mind. And then I actually called him by his name. Now, he had never treated me before I went into the coma. So that surprised him. It really caught him off guard. And he didn't know what to say to that. But he left the room. And
hey, Jerry, relax. All right,
I know.
I'm gonna be fine.
Yeah, I did. I said, good afternoon, Dr. Chan. And he said, how do you know my name? And I said, you came in this morning to remove fluid from my lungs. That's what I said to him. And he said, you couldn't know that. You were in a coma. And I said, really? I said, oh, because I was aware of everything that was happening in this room.
Right.
And So anyway, he couldn't make of it. And then he just said to my family, it's like he didn't want to be aware of that or acknowledge that. And he said to my family, it's the drugs messing with her brain. Don't raise your hopes. And he leaves the room. And I said to Danny, I said, isn't he the doctor that said to you yesterday that I won't even make it through the night? And that's when Danny said, he didn't even say that in the room. He said that down the hallway in the nurse's station. You couldn't possibly have heard it. And I said, well, I saw it. I saw him telling you.
Wow.
And that's when they started to realize something had happened.
What's remarkable about this is that this should be enough, your story alone, and I think it has for many people. I mean, you've impacted, talk about your life's, the life's purpose. And I'm sure there's multifaceted, and I don't want to reduce it to this one thing, but tens of millions of people have heard this account. And if you hear this account, it's got to assuage so much fear, because you really did something that the mainstream materialist, reductionist medical system and current zeitgeist believes is impossible. And then here you are, and being like, well, you guys are going to have to rethink your stories because there's something different that happens. And I'm proof of that.
Yes. And that's exactly how I thought it was going to be. Because when I came back, within 4 days or so, the tumors really started to shrink and dissolve, and the doctors couldn't believe it. In 3 weeks, they couldn't even find a trace of cancer in my body.
Unbelievable.
Yes. And then in 5 weeks, they let me go home because they kept testing, they kept looking, they wanted to be sure. And I had to build up strength in my body. And they said, we're not letting you go home until you hit 100 pounds. So eventually, because I was now eating again, and so eventually I hit 100 pounds. I was not using the heart rate, the breathing. I was connected to a oxygen tank. Sure. So that went on the second or third day. I was breathing again. But finally, they let me go home in March of 2006 to live my life cancer-free. And I thought, this is it. People have to rethink reality and science. And I thought, this is what my purpose is. This is why I was sent back. I thought it was going to be easy, but it wasn't.
People want to cling to their fear. It's like we're so attached to our fear because we think it keeps us safe.
Yes, exactly.
So we fight for it.
People think fear keeps them safe, but actually love keeps you safe.
Oof. Yeah. Oof.
Yeah, love keeps you safe. And so I had no idea, especially in 2006. It's different today in 2024. But in 2006, my story, I wasn't in the woo-woo space. I mean, now I've crossed over into all the spaces, and I love it because I don't really care anymore how it sounds, or as long as people are willing to open up to it, I think it can help them, whether they're in the woo-woo space or the science space or the medical space. But at that time, I was only attracting people in the medical space, and they were all ready to debunk me.
Come up with some reason why you went into this spontaneous remission. And even that in and of itself is like this catch-all category for the stuff that they don't want to have to explain, because if they believed that, they might have to rethink their whole cancer industrial complex, process.
Exactly. Like, I'll tell you something that happened is that, so my oncologist, he knew something had happened. He told me, I don't even know what to write in your medical record. And then I told him what I experienced. And he believed me because he was the one that took the fluid out of my lungs. And so he said, I'll tell you the truth. You're not the first person to share a story like that with me. He hadn't experienced someone healing from cancer in that way, but he had experienced people telling him about when they were in a coma or when their heart stopped beating, of what they saw, their body. So he said, I actually completely believe you. I know this happens. So this is what he said to me in private. Many months later, as my story started to spread, I was approached by a newspaper, a journalist, local. So I was living in Hong Kong, local newspaper. And my oncologist, he is the head oncologist, the head professor of the leading teaching hospital in Hong Kong. Very, very prestigious establishment. He has a very good reputation. So anyway, a newspaper interviews me, and I tell them the story. And then the reporter, the journalist, she says, would your oncologist be willing to verify what you've said? I said, yeah, of course, he believes me. So she goes and interviews him, and he throws me under the bus.
Oh.
Yes. He said, oh, she's very lucky to be alive. She is very lucky to be alive. It was a spontaneous remission. We have that. Sometimes that does occur. We don't have an explanation for it yet. But, he did not back me up on anything. And he said, and then when she mentioned what I experienced on the other side, the visions and what I saw, he actually said that the drugs mess with the mind. And that's what really got to me. I thought, wow. And when we were in the hospital, you were so nice, you were so kind, and you believed me. And much later, I met another oncologist who researched my case, and he said, whichever way I look at it, you should be dead. And he actually wrote me the testimonial after going through my entire medical file with a fine-tooth comb. He did, and also Dr. Jeffrey Long of NDERF, who is also an oncologist, went through some of my medical records. So I got it verified by other oncologists who weren't the ones treating me, but who went through my medical file. And they agreed that if somebody is actually practicing oncology, and if they were to admit at that time that you had an NDE and that's why you healed, they can say goodbye to their career. That's what they said to me. So I thought, wow, that is going to prevent any forward movement of people healing from having experiences like this.
Yeah. Well, this is now starting to, the solidity of that paradigm is now there's like roots that are kind of moving through the concrete, on like a sidewalk when there's a tree, and the tree sends the roots down and starts to bust up the pavement. That the steady sheen of that pavement has little cracks and roots of life that are kind of bursting through. And so we're in an interesting time, because with the research done at University of Virginia on reincarnation, with the stories that are being shared now through the podcast, where you actually people get to not only hear your words written, but to feel the truth of it. Like anthro-ontologically, like the people's body, like I can feel the truth of it. I have zero doubt. Like I'm at absolute, and I come to everything a little bit skeptical, but when I feel it in my body, I'm like, yeah, of course this happened.
Yeah. Yes. And that's what's really changing. And that's this terrain and, this world we're in today has been really great. Like doors have been opening and people are more open, because they're also starting to see that the old methods aren't working anymore. They're not working as much. And it was interesting because in the first few years, all I faced were debunkers. And I thought, I'm not cut out for this. I'm not cut out for this. So when I was ready to just give it all up, and I set my story free. I put it on the internet, and I didn't even have my full name on it. It was just called Anita M's NDE, and I let it go. I thought, I've done my part. I've fulfilled my mission. I wrote my story, set it free. Anyone who's meant to read it will read it. Unbeknownst to me, the story went viral. And because up until that point, I had only been interviewed by people in Hong Kong, in the city I lived in. And I was at conferences, medical conferences, and so on. But once I put it on the internet, that was it. It went viral, and it was picked up by Wayne Dyer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when everything changed. And then even the University of Virginia, which you mentioned, they also picked up my story, and Dr. Bruce Grayson, he researched it and sent me tons and tons of questions to answer. So I'm part of his research project.
Beautiful.
Yes, and Jeffrey Long. And so I got involved in a whole new world of near-death experiences and people who are curious and who are open and who wanted to know more. And so I was starting to receive a different type of questions. They were no longer debunking questions or doubting questions or trying to trip me up questions.
Just genuine curiosity.
Genuine curiosity. It was really people wanting to know more, wanting to understand, and that felt really good.
Of course, of course. All right, there's a lot of things I want to talk about. One is this idea of reincarnation. Now, if you don't believe in reincarnation and if you actually take the diligence to look at the research done by University of Virginia, it's conclusive. But nonetheless, it's still a lot of people don't believe in it. But also I think people misunderstand it. And I've heard you talk a bit about this as well. So what's your current understanding, having experienced this state, about the nature of reincarnation, which of course is a belief that came from your traditional faith.
Yes.
So what is now your current belief on reincarnation?
So it's a little bit different. I do believe we have multiple lives, but I don't think it's as simplistic as sequential, one after the other, where we learn our lessons from one and we take them to the next one. And if you're bad in this life, then you have to repay in the next life. It's not as simplistic as that. I see it as very different. We are a soul that is humongous, powerful. Like what you see, this physical body is only the tip of the iceberg. And this is a tiny part of you, a very tiny part. This life that you are living, this physical life, as Aubrey Marcus, is just a blip in the ocean of your soul. Your soul in and of itself is infinite. And think about how many souls there are. There are billions of souls, and each one of us is infinite. And when we are not in our physical body and we fully realize ourselves as this soul, we are a soul, expressing just for this blip, this second as this body, but we are a soul. We realize that we have access to all the other souls because we're not limited by a physical body.
Mm-hmm.
Once you remove the physical element, there's no limit. There's nothing stopping you from bleeding out all over into everyone and everything. And so I find that this is the way I see it, or the way that I felt the understanding is so hard to put into words and so complex. I can understand why people believe in reincarnation in the simplistic way. It's a good stepping stone for people who don't even believe in reincarnation or have never heard of it.
Or the eternity of the continuity of consciousness.
Exactly. People who are not even aware of the eternity of the continuity of consciousness. People are not even aware of that. Reincarnation is a good place to start when they start reading books like Journey of Souls, and when they start to realize that, oh, we are something more. But what I experienced, excuse me, just from going by my firsthand experience of being a soul without the physical body, I was aware that I had lived multiple lives, and I couldn't distinguish which were past, present, and future. But also, I had the ability to access information from other people's lives because there's no boundary between my soul and your soul. You and I are connected. We could feel each other's feelings, but there's a conditioning that has come with being in a physical body that prevents us from doing so. But in actuality, if we were never conditioned that way, we would be completely overlapping. So that's what it was like. So when somebody says, I had a past life as Cleopatra, it's their soul bleeding into the soul of whoever was at one point Cleopatra, but they've been many things. Each of us has been many things and have yet to be many things. But it's not sequential in the sense that because I did that last time, this is going to happen to me. No, all of it is to form a completion of the evolution of your soul.
Of all possibilities.
Of all possibilities.
Right. Yeah. So this is the way I understand it, and let's see if there's any ways that you can kind of contrast from your own personal experience. I understand that there's the soul of Aubrey,
yes,
which has a deep kind of remembrance of the Aubrey life that crosses over, like your father.
Yes.
Your father still remembered he was your father.
Yes.
And he was acting as this kind of the personal soul. But the personal soul is connected to what I would call the oversoul. And the oversoul has many personal souls that are all combined. So it's like if one soul is like a tentacle of a jellyfish, then there's a bigger jellyfish, which is like the oversoul, which has had many personal tentacles.
Yes.
And then the jellyfish is connected to a larger kind of angelic realm or archangelic realm of different ways that it's filtered through different lenses in the aggregate. So there's even a soul above the oversoul. And then eventually there's just the one, the love itself.
Yes.
And so we're connected through love itself, and then we're connected through all of our personal souls in the oversoul. And then there's like the angelic soul. And so I've been able to, through my own journeys, kind of trace this lineage, which has this multi-dimensional aspect of the one love, which we're all connected to, and then a larger kind of filtering through a particular angelic archetypal lens, and then into the oversoul, which has the many tentacles of our lives. And then there's still the unique soul of our unique self that exists as well, but they're all kind of nested in this multi-dimensional fractal.
Oh, I like that. That's a good analogy. I hadn't thought of it that way. I sometimes use the analogy of a mirror ball where every soul is one mirror tile. And we're all connected to every other soul. And some of the mirror tiles, many of them are angelic beings.
Right.
But some of them who incarnate as humans, they refract light like onto the walls. So that's where you see the specks of light on the walls. Those are us expressing ourselves in this time and space as a human being. And we see ourselves as separate because all those specks of light on the wall are seen as separate. But they're being refracted from this mirror tile, which is the soul, which is connected to all these other souls. And all of them together is God, one mirror ball.
Yeah. Beautiful.
So that's the other way that I look at it. And when I encountered my dad on the other side, it was like he wanted me to know that what you saw of me was that limited speck of time that I was your dad in this life. But this is who I really am. I am a soul. I am a being that is infinite and that has lived multiple lives. I have been many things. But for this particular life, that's who I was for you. And it caused you a lot of pain. But I'm going to show you now that that's not who I am.
It's so interesting that you use the image of the mirror ball, because I spent 6 days in what's called a darkness retreat. And so this is one of my psychonautic adventures, but no medicine, just the pure absolute blackness of being isolated in the darkness. And around day 3, I started to have visions. And this is common for this practice, where there's what they believe to be and what I believe to be an endogenous DMT release that actually opens the veils. So the black goes from you just see nothing. It's just black. And then you start to, I started to have visions. And I started to see exactly what you said. They looked a little bit like golf balls. They were like golf balls.
Wow.
And I was seeing these golf balls, and some were actually shaped in like a elliptical blimp-like shape, but some were actually exactly round. I had no idea what they were. And the facilitator also actually came from a Hindu faith, interestingly. Her name was Bharati. And Bharati, she would check in on me every once in a while, after every couple days. And I asked her, I was like, I'm seeing these, and she's in the dark as well with me, so I can't see her, but I'm seeing these golf balls that are just up there. And she goes, oh, those are souls. And he's like, you can talk to them if you like. And I was like, oh, whoa. And what really, how this is making sense to me as you describe it is the golf ball is all of every different facet of that, every different mirror on that was a personal aspect, but it was also connected to a larger whole. And so when I would talk to, whoever was appearing there, I'd start to get curious, ask questions, then I'd have communications with people who'd passed, people who were actually still living. So that's what I'm saying. It's not like you have to die to become, participate in this larger oversoul. You're participating currently, right now, in the oversoul. And then, so from that, then you can imagine that golf ball, imagine it like you had a tangible sphere, like a cue ball or something that was like solid. And that each one of those oversouls was like one atomic molecule or one atom in this larger sphere, which was all of God.
Yeah. Wow. I like that imagery. But that's so interesting that you had a very similar image.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And these experiences that you have personally, when someone tries to debunk you or someone tries to tell you that this isn't, it's kind of comical. I mean, it feels unfortunate. You're like, but you've experienced it yourself.
Yeah.
Like, the truth.
It is comical. I remember one time very early on, shortly after it happened, I was actually invited to speak at a conference with medics and academics, and I was invited to share my story. And I was asked also about what do I think healed me, and I started to explain that it was the discovery of who I really am and that I'm really a soul and that my body healed. But I remember something that they said, which was, it was so close-minded when they said that, but do you think it could have been the meds just messing with your brain? And I said, even if it was, so this was my response. I said, even if it was, nobody can explain how the cancer healed and how the tumors just disappeared and how the cancer cells just stopped replicating. And this was his response. He said, could you maybe have been misdiagnosed and maybe you didn't have cancer at all? Can you believe that? And this is for real. I am not even kidding.
Oh, man.
I said, I had cancer for 4 years and in that time had been treated by 5 different doctors. So I would have had to have been misdiagnosed by 5 doctors.
Yeah. And it's so wild how deeply these belief systems run and how people just can't accept this.
Yes.
But if they do accept it, then the lessons of what you learned about and for anybody listening, these lessons about that which healed your cancer, right? So I want to go into this as well because I'm not sure if you're familiar, I'm sure you are, but Dr. Joe Dispenza's work.
Yes.
Which is basically he's helping people to get to this state without an NDE where you have absolute faith, where you're living in a reality, which is, he talks about harnessing that placebo effect to the ultimate degree, where you're living in a reality where you're certain of where you're going to be and what's going to happen. And you got that transmission from your NDE where you just knew you were going to heal.
Yeah.
So one part of it is harnessing, it seems like harnessing and accessing that, quote, placebo effect, that ability to believe, to pray as if it has already been done, to see the future as if it already is currently. So that's one aspect. And the other aspect has to do with a lot of, as you said, dispatching of your fear and replacing it instead with love and all the other things. But go through both of those different vectors of how like any ordinary person can harness maybe that belief in their wellness and the vision of the future, as well as the things we need to clean up in our emotional states and psychological.
Yes. So what I usually tell people is that when you have a diagnosis, we immediately focus our mind on the illness and how our body is going to deteriorate, like once you get a diagnosis. And I think the biggest issue starts with our belief that cancer is really scary and cancer is a death sentence. And the way that cancer has been portrayed and framed in our society, in our culture generally, that is the first biggest mistake that we have made. And so this is where I do a lot of videos where I am pleading with doctors to please, please, please don't give people death sentences. You cannot tell them when they're going to die. And if there is one thing that a doctor can do for their patient, just one thing that they can do, it would be to make sure that their patient leaves the clinic feeling a little bit better, lighter, more uplifted or hopeful when they leave the clinic than when they walked in. And so it starts from there. And I wish that I could have the impact on doctors, but it's starting. There are oncologists who are telling their patients to read my book, which is why I'm saying it's changed over the years. I have a lot of oncologists talking to me now, but it starts from there, from when they get the diagnosis. Because for a lot of people, it's still the case that when the white coat tells you something,
It's like a priest.
It's like a priest, yeah. And that's it. It's so hard to get it out. The white coat needs to say something along the lines of, I'm going to support you through this journey. You can make it through the journey. If, don't give them the worst stats, because to me, and I'm going by my experience of what I experienced and how I see it, the worst thing you can do for anybody with an illness is to remove hope. That is the worst thing. What it takes to really feel or know that you're going to be well is to plan a future that you are excited about and live it as though it is happening, as though you know it's going to happen.
Hope as a memory of the future.
Yes. Whereas our current medical model keeps people's focus on the illness and the trajectory that this illness may possibly take. And that's where your mind goes. What we need to do is we need to actually build a trajectory of wellness, of what am I going to do when I get well? What do I want to do with the rest of my life? So let me go back and say another thing I believe. I believe that for certain diseases like cancers, I think that most cancers are very, very preventable and very curable, but not necessarily with drugs. I also believe that there are basically probably only two causes for cancer. One is toxins, radiation, that sort of thing. And the second is purely emotional trauma, psychological. Those are the two categories. So with the toxins and all that probably has to be treated medically. But with the latter, I think all of that should be and can be reversed, provided the person going through it is willing to do the work of letting go and making the changes. I think all cancer is caused by that, by trauma, by past, by emotions, from pain and hurt. All of it can be reversed, provided the person going through it wants to reverse it and is willing to do the work.
Yeah, it's so, I watched my uncle, actually, who I love very much, Uncle Craig, and I watched him die a slow and painful death from lymphoma. And I remember that put a lot of fear in me because he was a hero of mine. He was amazing tennis player. He was the first person to take me out, shooting. He was such an interesting and beautiful, beautiful man. And I watched him just get skinnier and skinnier and die. And so there was a big fear that I had to grapple with as well. And my medicine journeys have helped me to transcend that fear, as well as other information that I've gathered that have helped me, both like Dispenza's work, stories like your own about how your belief impacts the reality, and then other different ideas about cancer. Travis Christofferson wrote an incredible book called The Metabolic Theory of Cancer and Tripping Over the Truth, The Metabolic Theory of Cancer. And he talks about how cancer cells have lost connection with the whole of the self, and they start fermenting sugar to just grow on their own, of their own accord. And actually, so he has a treatment regimen that involves a restricted ketogenic diet to actually starve these cells of the sugar as their source and then provide enough energy. And then he has this hyperbaric oxygen and really good research, either as an adjunct to traditional therapy. But there's so much more to look at in this that covers all the vectors, and any good doctor/healthcare professional should be able to lay out all of this and put like an equal amount of attention in diet and actually like mindset and belief, and like work with you to be like, and just look at you with that kind of priestly authority that they have in their white coat, and just stare with their heart and with their full soul and be like, you're going to make it through this.
Yeah.
And like, we're going to help you through this. And if that happened, yeah, maybe sometimes they'd be wrong, and maybe sometimes they'd have families that were like, you told them they were going to make it through. But still, the chances of the person making it through, if the doctors did that, it just raises itself exponentially.
It does. The chances of them making it would go up, and the quality of their life, even if they don't make it, would go up.
Yeah. 100%. So what do you say to people who find themselves in fear or have anger? Where does anger play in this? Does anger play a role in this? A lot of people have said cancer is also a disease of repression. You're not saying what you need to say or expressing what you need to express.
I was extremely repressed, extremely, a lot of it because of my upbringing. I never allowed myself to be myself because I was always just wanting approval from people and approval from my dad and from my community and from everybody. So I would always do what everybody else wanted me to do. And if you had 10 people in a room and if 9 of them approved of me and 1 didn't, you can be sure I would be dancing for the one that didn't to try and win them over. And so I was extremely repressed and never allowed myself to be who I am. And I know that hugely contributed to the disease. Mm-hmm. And so I would tell people that, so there's many elements. It depends on your personality. It could be anger, it could be repression, lack of self-love. But I have a way that I view life that I will share with you. I've shared this on a couple of at my events and a couple of podcasts, and I think this really helps people because when I realized that I am not my physical body and that I am actually so much more, and I'm a soul, I realized that when my soul made the decision to come back and to live, and I knew I had a purpose, and I knew all I had to do was love myself and be myself fearlessly. Those were the only two rules. I didn't have to figure anything out. It was not easy, even though it sounds simple, it's not easy being that way. But I realized that when I was being and doing those 2 things, that's what feeds my soul. And the soul is actually the determining factor of your quality of life and your physical body, the condition and the health of your physical body. When your soul and we can even, let's extrapolate, let's say your life force energy, when your life force energy is being diminished because you're not expressing yourself, you're frustrated, you're angry, you're repressed, your life force energy starts to diminish. The more you start to diminish, your soul starts to diminish who it really is, that's when your body starts to experience disease. It starts to have symptoms that over time get more and more. So I look at it this way. And again, this is just something I do in my own head as a result of the near-death experience. I imagine that if I want like a really strong life force energy, so that means you're really strong, you're powerful, you're able to go out and take on the world you want. That's what we all want, strong life force energy. We want good health. In order to have strong life force energy, we have to constantly be able to feed ourselves energy or do things that energize us. So if we give energy a currency, and I know it feels like I'm going off on a tangent, but you'll get it when I come to the point. If we give life force energy a currency, and let's say a good night's sleep gives you 12 units of energy when you wake up, hypothetically. And then after you wake up, you have a nice, healthy breakfast. That gives you another 4 units of energy. You're at 16 units. Let's say you go to a job you love, like what you do. Let's say you are doing podcasts and chatting with people, and that gives you another 4 units. So your job feeds you, your work, your life work. It's not a job. It's your passion. You're following a passion. It feeds you another 4 units on that day. So you're at 20 units of energy. Let's say you're in a relationship where you're really happy. In the evening, you're both having a meal together and you're happy, so you're at 24 units of energy. You get a good night's sleep. The next morning, you wake up with 36 units. So you've got all this energy equity.
Building a surplus.
You're building energy surplus. Now, let's say, on the other hand, you wake up with your 12 units of energy and you're in a rush to get to work. And so you eat a bad breakfast, some fast food or something that hasn't contributed any energy. Maybe it's taking your body energy to digest it. So from 12, you're down to 11. Then let's say you work in LA and you're stuck in traffic to get to work. And you lose another 2 units of energy being stuck in traffic.
And then the more angry you get about the traffic, the more energy you lose.
Exactly. And then you go to a job that you hate where your boss is a bully and you lose another 6 or 8 units of energy.
And then you take a shower and you get in a hypothetical argument with your boss or your spouse while you're in the shower. And then you're just spending energy all over the place.
Yes. So then at the end of the day, let's say you're down 10 units or 15 units, you're in energy deficit. And then the following day, like let's say because of that, you didn't sleep well. So instead of 12 units, you only gained 8 units, but you're still in deficit. Now you're going through another day, traffic, bad boss, bad food. And every day you're going into energy deficit. Now, which life sounds more common?
Unfortunately, the latter.
That's where people have to make the changes. So I've realized that by putting my energy assets or energy, by putting my value on my energy higher than my value on money and other things, that's when my life works for me. And the more energy equity that you build up, the more you're able to deal with the difficulties, the situations that get you angry, the more equity you have to carry you through that. And the more equity you have, the healthier your physical body. The more depleted you become, that's how it slowly drains your body. So that's the most simplistic way I can think of for people to get a tangible vision of what I'm trying to say. But for different people, different things feed their energy and different things deplete their energy. For me, it was the fear. It was the lack of self-love. It was the repression. It was my culture. It was being told to serve everyone else except me. I was a doormat. I was subservient. I was a doormat. I saw God in everyone's eyes except my own. It was only when I died that I learned to see God in my own eyes.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. And, I've currently right where I'm at right now is I have a lot of spiritual understanding. I have a lot of solid mindset practices. I have a lot of physical optimization practices, but I've put myself in a position where the demands of my life as I've constructed it and as I believe require me to spend more units than I'm getting back. And I'm starting to run out of techniques to actually stay in energy surplus versus deficit. And then I'm starting to feel things starting to break down in my body. And it's a real kind of wake up call moment for me, because I'm realizing like I have to make some changes. And it's not that what I'm doing isn't coming from love or there's some structural fault, but just the pure volume
Yes.
of how much I'm trying to hold and manage and create. And it's kind of like a grindstone that's just grinding on my end things. And then I use exogenous things, more caffeine or kratom or whatever it might be, to try and get this artificial energy that's coming. And it works for a little while, but the tax collector comes and eventually these things stop providing energy, and I'm starting to feel the deficit. So this is a beautiful, and I've already been feeling this, it's a beautiful reminder of like, come on, Aub, like, you know what you got to do here. You gotta make some changes. You got to shift some priority, and that's gonna potentially let some people down, and that's okay.
And it is okay. And if it's any consolation, I do it too. So I love the work I do. I love traveling. I love doing live events. But sometimes I take on so many in my excitement, like, yes, I want to go to Europe. Yes, I want to do this. I want to do a cruise. And then by the time I'm like halfway through my travel schedule, I am exhausted and I feel myself going into energy deficit, or at least not making as much, like I'm using my surplus. And I realize, wow, even too much of a good thing is depleting my energy. But the idea here is to be aware that the most important thing is your energy. Watch where it's going. And then you know that next time I won't do so many trips back to back.
Right.
I'll pace them out, because that, even though I love doing them, it depletes my energy to do so many. It's the flying in the plane, it's the airports. Those things are depleting me.
Mm-hmm.
So you start to think differently. And even as a culture, we have all been trained to put the economy before anything else, economy before well-being. I put well-being before the economy, and I do that by checking in my energy status.
Yeah, so important, and all of these little decisions that we make too about like what food is going to really support you. And I love that you use Lifeforce energy, because I was, having a conversation with my friend Max Lugavere, who's really in the nutrition space, and I was really saying that you could actually measure units. Like, we're always measuring macronutrients, micronutrients, anti-nutrients, all of these things. But the one thing that I think is missed is like how much life force energy is in the food that we eat too, and how much is required from our body to deal with it. So we eat some, greasy French fries and all of this, like, it's costing us energy. Yes, there may be carbohydrates that are helpful in some aspect from the potatoes, but all of the fried seed oils and all of this crap that we're putting in, we're actually, from our food, getting into a net energy deficit, where you can look at something like, kale, for example, which has people on both sides. Some are like, never eat it. There's too many anti-nutrients. But actually, like, if you're having like organic greens that have grown and harnessed their energy from the sun and harvested in a beautiful way, there's a life force energy that's being transmitted from that. Also, even if you're having meat, like, what was the life of the animal and how is that transferring? So like a whole category, an energetic lens of life force energy that's actually coming through, which is why I like always choosing spring water if I can.
Yes.
Like all these things, I think we're looking at things too narrowly through this reductionist lens.
Yes,
and
we
not
are.
making life force energy a category that we're actually quantifying and measuring, even if it's in the imaginal of like, and really believing that.
Yes, and that to me is really what helps me to do what I do, to live my life, because even following your passion, that gives you a tremendous amount of life force energy.
Right.
Laughing, finding your joy.
Laughing is huge.
It's huge.
I can
of
just
these.
feel my energy meter,
Yes.
going up after I, really have like in the full ecstasy of the hilarity. Not
Yes.
just a forced chuckle, but like in the laughter where you just can't stop.
Yes.
Those moments, I just feel like all of the things just bursting out of me. And actually, I've actually gone through, I remember recently, I was really feeling so exhausted, so depleted. And I went into this just absolute hilarity, with one of my dear friends, and we were laughing so hard. And then my body went through this big purge. It was really interesting. Like my bowels cleared and like all of this stuff happened. It's like I flushed my body full of energy and I went through this kind of deep recovery cycle.
Wow. See, it really does work. And for me, laughter and humor is a big part of my life. I mean, it's an important part of my life. And I make sure that friends, people I hang with, they're people that can really take life lightly, because we really don't need more heaviness. I mean, mainstream media already provides enough heaviness for the world. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And us focusing on all of that, all of the negativity that's out there. There's so much. It's an all-you-can-eat buffet of negativity.
Yes.
And if you focus your attention, it's not that it's not important to look at all of these potential existential risks or the challenges that we're facing or your own political beliefs. I understand. There's a certain level of awareness, but if you gorge yourself on these belief systems, it's going to have this kind of toxic effect.
Yep. And it does, and we kind of see it sometimes happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you do when you catch yourself in these kind of negative thought patterns or these other places? Do you have like an inner voice that you use? Is there a self-talk that you kind of help yourself through these difficult moments?
I do have an inner voice, so I have to find a quiet space. I have to actually, sometimes I will put on music, but I need to, so there's a couple of things I do. I can go out in nature, or I can find a space at home where I'm just lying there with some music and I go inward and I listen to that voice. And so when I force the voice, so I feel guided all the time and I hear the voice all the time. But here's the dichotomy, is that when you most need it, when you're feeling really fearful or you're feeling something where you need that voice, in that need, you kind of force the voice to come. That's where your mind comes in and you don't quite hear the voice. But when you let go and you're like, and so this is what I say to myself, I don't actually do the thing of, please come in now, please help me, please take over. I just lie there and I just go, I'm yours. Do whatever you will. Just take me wherever you will. I'm yours. I'm just going to be passive here, and you show me the way. Mm-hmm. And I just do that, and I don't expect anything, and then I hear what comes in.
It's beautiful. In the lineage that I'm currently studying, which is the wisdom of Solomon through this kind of Kabbalist, kind of deep mystical lens, they call this whisper, they call it the lehisha. And the whisper, it's the whisper of what I call your potential, which is really another name for your soul. It's like who you really are will be like actually whispering through, and who you really are is connected to God. And so, but it filters through this kind of personal lens, and then you can hear the whisper. And that's the more powerful than and it's not that it's not helpful to have the inner voice that can say like, come on, buddy, you got this. And so I'll sometimes transpose a voice of like the loving father, like the divine father or the divine mother, and they have different characteristics of how they speak, and that can help. But the most powerful is that just that whisper that comes in when you get really quiet.
Yeah, that voice is very powerful. And that part of you, also something I realized from being on the other side, is that part of you, that whisper, is trying to communicate with you all the time, with us all the time. Yes. But we block it. We either don't listen to it, or we're too busy, or our minds are too busy, or we're too entrenched in stress and fear and worry. But it's only when we get quiet and then we can hear it.
Mm-hmm. So beautiful. So beautiful. Now you've started into this NDE kind of community, you could call it.
Yeah.
Is there any stories that you've heard that you've been like, that's not what I experienced at all? Is there or do they all kind of make sense based upon what your personal experience was?
There have been the occasional one or two, not many, but all of them, most of them, make sense in that I'm sure everybody still, regardless, we all have a lens through which we interpret.
The hermeneutic prism, it's often called.
Yes.
Yeah.
And even though I try to be as neutral as possible, it's inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
We all have a perceptive, we all have a perception, we all have a lens through which we filter our experiences. But even taking that into consideration, that everybody's got a lens, when I listen to someone's NDE, I can usually see through the lens that, oh yeah, it's their cultural upbringing. That's, of course, they're using those words, or of course they're interpreting it through that religion. But what they experience still makes sense to me. But it's very rare, but it has happened where there's been the occasional one or two where I think, I really doubt it was an NDE. There is no way they could have experienced that level of torture, evil, hell. There's just no way. It cannot exist, because the other side, when we cross over when you're without the physical, there is nothing that can harm you. There is nothing that can hurt you, because there isn't anything to hurt or harm. There is only clarity, understanding, and pure potential, and a desire to evolve and to help humanity to evolve.
That's beautiful. Well, any other final words you'd like to leave the listeners with? Thank you so much for sharing your story, and just for also the love that I feel that's bursting out of you. It's clear to see the motivation for this is not to, put yourself on some pedestal and get this. It's just, you're really sharing this from love, and I really deeply appreciate that. So any other final words of love for anybody listening right now?
Let's see. I would want everybody to know that their main and biggest responsibility is to expand love for themselves. In other words, expand their life force energy. You could replace the word life force energy with love, because that's what you're doing when you do things that expand your energy. You're doing things that are acts of self-love. So expand your own energy. And that is the best thing you can do, not only for yourself, but for humanity, because we are all connected. And if I can just give this quick analogy, that if you imagine that all of us are connected, we're all on this planet. And imagine this planet is one living organism with all these humans that are all connected, but they don't realize they're connected. And when every human is expanding their energy, what we're doing is we're expanding and evolving the planet, and we're adding more love. And it's like a physical body. When a physical body is sick, when you say someone has cancer, it means the cancer cells are replicating faster than the healthy cells. But when somebody's healthy, it's because the healthy cells are replicating faster than the cancer cells. In this world, we are seeing that there are a lot of people living by fear. That seems to be more common than people living from the place of love and expansion. More people are living from the place of depletion and fear. So if you want to help this world to be less fearful and more loving, if you start living from this place of love, you're actually adding to the whole. But when you live from a place of fear, you're actually depleting from the whole. So go out, live life with joy, passion, love, eat chocolate, good, healthy, dark chocolate.
Yeah, for sure.
And you're actually doing a service for yourself and the planet.
So beautiful. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you so deeply. Thanks for making the trip out here. It's really special this is the first time I've actually spoken to somebody I've, obviously read different accounts, but to actually hear it firsthand is a very special experience for me. So, and I hope it was for all of you listeners as well.
Thank you so much. I'm actually honored that I'm the first near-death experiencer you've spoken to in person.
No doubt.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Absolutely. And thank you so much to everybody listening. We love you, and we'll see you next week. That was amazing.
Wow. You have really beautiful energy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. It's interesting that, my ability and my dedication to my own path has offered me not with the same profundity perhaps as yours, but enough of a glimpse that there's so much resonance with what you're saying and what I know to be true as well. So it's really cool. But that also fills me with this same idea, this sense of deep love. But it's very important. It's very actually personally important for me that I had this conversation with you now, because I'm like now looking out at the horizon and just realizing I have to take care of my energy.
Yes, you do.
I just have to. And fortunately, I have like really beautiful friendships and relationships and a lot of exciting things in the horizon, but I'm just dispersing myself too thin.
Yeah, and the world needs you, so don't do that.
Yeah,
the world needs you. And
thank you.
What I've loved about this conversation is that I was actually able to go really deep with you, because you already understood so much of it from your own personal experience. So we were really able to go deep into the actual experience, the definitions of God, of love, of energy, of all of it. That doesn't happen very often, because usually there's a lot of other, like we talk about how I integrated it, how did people react to it, and we talk a little bit about reincarnation, but people aren't always able to go, not everyone's able to go beyond the linear version of reincarnation.
Right.
And people can't go past there being no hell on the other side. And so, but I found that I was able to go really deep with you, because usually I'm feeling my way as I'm talking, and you were really open to just going all the way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There's no resistance there.
Yeah, none.
Resistance at all. Yeah. And it's beautiful for me to hear this lens, because I've had my own path, and I've spoken with all the mystics of these different traditions, but this particular path is, there's a real purity to this path. It was, because when you take a medicine, you're interacting not only with yourself but also the spirit of that medicine. So there is a lens by which things are happening, and I'm aware of that as well. So and I always recognize that I have my own prism, and my own prism will actually color the thoughts and beliefs that I have, but it's still enough to get this. But with you, it was just really cool that, to be able to, receive this wisdom from that lens and go like, okay, yeah. Also makes me want to really like, especially people with cancer, like to really, because there's so much fear. We have a ranch in Sedona, and the groundskeeper is an old cowboy who's been out on that land for way before I even bought the land. So I've owned it for close to 10 years, but he was there another 15 years before that, living on the land, and he's with his son there now, but he has cancer.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really interesting because, he's a cowboy. He doesn't have like a lot of spiritual.
Yeah.
He's a spiritual being in that he's been with horses. He's ridden the horses for 50 years, and he knows nature.
Yeah.
But the medical industrial complex has got him like so locked into this state, and it's just hard to override these kind of fear mechanisms that are in there, but it's kind of a scary industry to me, because my practice is to do the medicine work, and I also do body work, like physically, kind of like, so the body work that I do is part, myofascial release and massage, but also part energetic.
Yeah.
And so I worked on him on the table when I was in a medicine journey, and I could feel not only the poisons that come from the chemo and the radiation, I could
Yes.
feel all the poisons, but also more than that, I could feel the fear. Like the fear is just so intense that they implant, fear of the next test. Is it
The fear-
regressing or is it advancing? And the fear was like so palpable. I like actually got chills and started sweating. And
That's how I was. That's exactly how I was.
yeah.
The fear, I was like gripped with the fear, gripped with it. And when I died, and I wish I said this, but when I died, I realized that the fear was actually the bigger disease. It's bigger than the cancer itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Fear is the disease.
Yeah. Fear is the disease.
Yeah.
And I really believe that if our medical complex focused on wellness instead of illness, we would see a big shift.
Mm.
If they focused on what it means to be well and they taught people how to do the work to go on a wellness trajectory, if it came from those white coats with authority that said, you can do this one step at a time,
Yeah.
but you have to want to do this. You have to, it's time for you to look at your life and what you want to do with the rest of your life.
Mm.
You can turn it around.
Yeah. Yeah. Such an important message. This is so great. Well, thank you to both of you. And Danny, mad respect to you for, being with her through this whole process. And I'm sure you were an inextricable part of this whole ride. So, mad respect to you as well.
Thank you very much. But, from my point of view, it's, the vows somewhere said, in sickness and in health.
Yeah.
So, for me, it was just, where else would I be?
Yeah.
He was amazing. He just stuck by my side throughout the whole journey.
I can feel that. And
Yeah.
that's, it's not a given. So, and I know that, it may seem like a given for you, but it's not a given. So it's a testament to your own character.
Talking to people around the world, and the first time I heard somebody tell me that their partner or spouse bailed on them, I thought, like, it's 1 in 8 billion, bad word. Today I'm talking to people, and it's something like 1 in 100,000.
Like, it's not uncommon, and we've started to see that. And I realized I was so blessed with someone like Danny. Honestly, I don't think I would have come back if he wasn't here waiting for me.
Yeah.
Maybe you would have done better.
Life wouldn't be so fun.
Thanks for tuning into this video. Make sure you hit subscribe. Follow me at Aubrey Marcus. Check out the Aubrey Marcus podcast, available everywhere. And leave a comment. Let me know if this video resonated or what else you would like to hear from me in the future. Thank you so much.